Hello, listeners, and welcome to another podcast of Conversations with Haider Rifaat. Today, I'll be examining the social psychological factors that lead to rape in Pakistan. Now, just to give you a brief background, rape is a very common social evil in Pakistan. It's not something that is new. The only difference is that it's getting more mainstream media attention than before, thanks to gender activism and the emergence of social media. There are a few important statistics to cite that are alarming at the same time. There are about 11 rape incidents reported in Pakistan every day. Recently, a teenage girl's body was dug up from the ground and raped by a group of men. We are already familiar with the Lahore Sialkot motorway rape incident that targeted a mother. And more recently, Noor Mukadam's rape and murder at the hands of Zahir Jaffer. To discuss further the rape epidemic in Pakistan, I've invited on my show today Dr. Bushra Hassan. She holds a PhD from the University of Sussex in social psychology and serves as an assistant professor at the International Islamic University. Her primary research interests include social, cultural, and gender psychology. Thank you so much, Bushra, for sparing time for this conversation. I would like you to first highlight some of the key social psychological factors that lead to rape.
Primarily, the societies that are built upon social and structural inequalities, vulnerabilities, and marginalization. And most importantly, the economic factor stands out as one of the main factors causing violent behavior against women, and that includes physical violence as well as sexual violence. So therefore, societies that are built upon strong structural hierarchies, inequalities, and strong patriarchal norms and ideologies provide a far more conducive environment for the occurrence as well as the reoccurrence of such a phenomenon. Alongside, among the psychological issues, what researchers have figured out is that the psychological control mechanism is one of the fundamental reasons and the driving factor for the perpetrator to indulge into such a kind of a crime, because that gives them a kind of a power dynamic and the gratification that they seek when they are able to control someone else, including children as well as women in a vulnerable position through sexual means, is one of the very driving and one of the very strong psychological reason that the perpetrator describe when they are investigated afterwards. Thirdly, the very brought up of the perpetrator. For example, if a child at a very primitive age is being exposed to some intense and violent behavior, including sexual behavior or physical violence even, those children have a greater tendency that they are being raised with a lack of sense of empathy and sympathy towards the victim. And there is a greater chance, it's not always going to happen for sure, but there is a greater chance that these things manifest themselves into some later on in their adult life. And when they are getting to a situation when they are in a position to actually manipulate and control someone else through physical means or through sexual means, there is a greater tendency that the perpetrator's characteristics, what they have acquired into the childhood at a very primitive age, become dominant, and then they get far more aggressive and far more manipulative than because of their childhood experiences. The very trait of narcissism is often closely associated with perpetrators' personality. By narcissism, we mean people who are having a strong and greater sense of grandiose.
And what motivates people to commit crimes as heinous as rape?
There are a number of motives which are associated with rape crime, and these include, but of course these are not limited to, the very motive of control, the motive to exert aggression upon someone, revenge, retaliation, and most importantly the control, power dynamic, and the sexual gratification that the perpetrator is seeking out of it. However, the important thing that I would like to highlight over here, which is often less discussed and less debated, is the fact that in this particular social and cultural context, whenever these unfortunate incidents happen, these motives in very subtle ways are being nourished, reinforced, and satisfied. For example, when such incident happen, you have come across that quite a lot of focus is upon victims' characteristics, and that gives rise to various kinds of gender stereotypes, like for example what she was wearing then, what hour of night that was, why she was there at first place, why she was there without any escort, and the list goes on. In terms of psychology, we call these as fundamental attribution errors, and more recently we label them as victim bashing or victim blaming. So the fundamental problem with victim bashing is that it takes away quite a lot of sympathy and quite a lot of empathy from the victim. And very unfortunately, in very subtle ways, in very unconsciously, you are reinforcing the very motive of the perpetrator, because all of these are providing unnecessary over justifications and justifications for their act. So all of this victim bashing and reinforcing these motives actually makes the problem far more worse, because the perpetrator gets all the psychological and social justification for their act, and any other person who is vulnerable, who is having same malicious intentions, will find far more justifications for their act, and the cycle will keep on going, unfortunately.
Right. I was mentioning earlier in my introduction how the rape epidemic is not new in Pakistan. We are now seeing more people come out and condemn sexual violence against Pakistani women. But why did it take us so many years to finally break the culture of silence and speak out so openly about rape victims, empathizing with them, and also calling out the perpetrators of rape?
Well, most importantly, awareness and education. In recent years, women are now more informed about the kinds of violence taking place against them and how to take help in such situations. And this has increased their access to information, their access to opportunities, and their access to justice. Besides, media in all its forms, like print media, electronic media, and most importantly, social media, because it has made the change and exchange of information far more speedy. And now the important thing is that now the information is not confined to a particular context or a particular region. It actually crosses the borders. It actually echoes around the world. And there are people who actually raise their voice, and sometimes it becomes a kind of a collective response towards such a traumatic incident. And besides, this social medium again has provided quite a lot of people a channel to raise their voice. So therefore, we can see a speedy response towards such incidents. Thirdly, very important role is being taken up by the civil society organizations, including the Aurat March in recent years and Aurat Foundation, and quite a lot of civil society organizations that have taken up a key role in increasing awareness against such incidents and providing social, psychological, as well as judicial support to the victim. And last but not the very least, I think there are quite a lot of government initiatives, like for example, recently there have been developments in the state's response to violence against women. For example, the Punjab government passed the Punjab Protection of Women Against Violence Act in 2016. And this is a milestone in terms of lawmakers' commitment to ensure the protection of women's rights. And likewise, the Sindh government passed the Domestic Violence Prevention Protection Bill in 2013. So all of these are the key indicators and the key contributing factors in increasing awareness against the crime, and has provided more voice to the people and a collective response and action that we can see in recent years that was not there previously.
Another key issue associated with sexual violence against Pakistani women is victim blaming. How can we achieve progress in our society for women if victim blaming continues despite awareness?
In order to provide answer to this particular question, let me share a very interesting piece of my own research with you. And although this research was about sexual harassment, however, it has provided quite a lot of interesting insights about rape phenomenon as well. And one of the key findings that I would like to elaborate upon over here is that when it comes to victim blaming or victim bashing, we have found that there is a very little gender divide between a man bashing the victim or blaming the victim and a woman blaming or bashing the victim. And this is something very concerning and upsetting that needs highlighting over here. Because in this particular situation, it's not only about men and their behavior and their attitude that needs discussing. However, there is a greater need to find out how a woman is supporting another woman. And I'm very sure that awareness in its true essence is inevitable when both men as well as women provide a support to the victim, irregardless of any gender stereotype, irregardless of any contextual factors attributing to it. Because of this victim blaming and bashing, quite a lot of cases are remained unreported, and there is a dire need for the victim to conceal their identity, and it makes the situation far more worse for them to actually deal with this trauma psychologically as well. So at the very least, when both men and women are taking greater civil responsibility and social responsibility to actually provide us all the support, due support to the victim, in those ways we can at the very least provide greater social and psychological and community support to the victims to actually somehow deal with this traumatic incident.
And finally, what are some preventative measures that can be adopted to put an end to this rape epidemic in Pakistan?
Overcoming this challenge requires a shift in the conservative mindset at first place, and besides collective thinking of male as well as female members of the society to recognize women's rights so that we can bring an improvement at all levels in the society. With that reference, I would like to emphasize the role of legislatives, although there are quite a lot of legislatives there. However, their timely and speedy implementation is the need of a time. Besides, systematic control, punishments and penalties need emphasizing. With that reference, I will request the role of media, because whenever these incidents happen, quite a lot of hype is there for with the incident. However, we know very little about what has happened to the perpetrator afterwards, what kind of punishments, what kind of penalties or sentences a perpetrator is going to have. Lastly, the very important thing that needs handling is changing mindsets to blame the victim. Rape is a crime in every sense of the word. Therefore, there should be no ifs, no buts, no when, how, when, where question need attributing to the victim. If there is anything that need questioning, if there is anything that need challenging, if there is any accountability, blaming and bashing, should be attributed to the perpetrator only.
Right. These were indeed some very interesting insights. Thank you so much, Dr. Bushra Hassan, for joining me today. Listeners, I hope this was an enlightening session for all of you. I hope you got to learn a lot from this and kind of understand this rape epidemic in Pakistan. I'm leaving the links to my social media accounts below in the description box, as well as at the end of this very episode. Make sure you check them out, join the relevant pages, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Until next time, take care. Bye bye.